Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Kowloon Generic Romance Season 1, Episode 11. Great episode. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So, the cold opening to this episode has us with Yulong as he's trying to decipher and trying to understand how this whole Kowloon thing works. Like, there's 4 subjects he's focusing on. Kudo, Yaomei, Miyuki, and Gwen. All 4 of these people can see the Kowloon. And he's like, right, they all have special ties to it. He's even saying, like, Miyuki loved Kowloon, even he would never really admit it. And even Yulong's like, yeah, I like Kowloon, but I don't have this special attachment to it, because initially that's his thought, that the thing that draws everyone to be able to see this other Kowloon is their attachment to it. And it's like, right, understandably, these different people would have attachments to it, but the thing is, why would Yao Mei have an attachment to Kowloon? If anything, she's got an attachment to people, but more specifically one person mainly in Kowloon, so she doesn't necessarily fit the mold that the other 3 do. So she kind of is a variable, like, how does that operate? And so we learned a little bit more about Miyuki's past in conjunction when Yulong is looking back on the past, and it turns out Miyuki joining the Heavy Numa family, which still is unclear to me. Because, like I said, like the phrasing they basically use is like him getting adopted into the family, which still could fit the mold of what I was thinking, that he's a bastard child, that like Miyuki's dad had an affair. Because I was about to say, like, that the phrasing made me feel like, are they implying that he had no blood relation to the Heavy Numa family and he was folded in and adopted in? I doubt that's the case. I'm still sticking with, like, it definitely has to be a bastard child situation. But either way, the whole tattoo he has on his back is what's meant to be a symbol of trust. He had to, like, show his father, like, yo, I'm here, like, I'm loyal to you. Even, like, splitting his tongue is like, yeah, that was done in front of him. And it's, like, all for his mom's treatment. And then the moment he said that, I was like, that's why you hate your dad so much. He failed to, like, treat your mom. And so I don't know if the moment he got what he wanted, he didn't care about Miyuki's mom anymore because he thought she was expendable, because this was probably most likely after his own, like, the heir to the Heavy Numa family died. So, like, he needed a replacement, and that's where Miyuki came into place. And now that he had Miyuki, it's like, well, you're part of the family. Like, he was so focused on what he lost, he didn't care about, like, Miyuki. Miyuki's just a means to an end, and it's like, I don't care about, like, whatever you lost. So, like, and even I never noticed this, but I guess I didn't go back and look to pay more attention to it, but it seems like Yulong, in solidarity, instead of cutting his tongue, he ends up splitting part of his ear just to say, like, yo, I've got your back, Miyuki. But then, like, Miyuki's mom ended up dying, and it's like, that's what set forth this whole path of revenge of, like, I'm going to make him pay. And Yulong was like, I'm going to have your back. And along the way, Yulong, present day, is making his way to Kowloon, and he finally is able to see Kowloon, because he starts thinking to himself, like, right, when you first started off, it was like your first move was, like, your attempt was, like, based on rage. Your second attempt was based off of your hometown, I guess, like Miyuki's motivations behind what he's doing. And then, you know, Yulong is kind of wondering to himself, it's like, do I regret, like, do I wish I had done something different or handled things differently in the past? And he's like, do I regret it? Is that what that is? And then he's finally able to see Kowloon, and he figures it's not attachment that makes people be able to see Kowloon. It's those with regrets, which fits the mold of all. It's the X factor that is applicable to all 4 people of Kudo, Yaomei, Gwen, and Miyuki. And I think it's beautiful too, because Miyuki and Yulong had that whole conversation a couple episodes ago about regret, and how Yulong was like, I don't have regrets or something. Like he was making a whole point like that. But now it's like, oh, the irony is you do have a regret and you didn't realize it until now. It's like now that you finally realize you do have regrets, the doorway to Kowloon is basically been open for you. And I love that thematically that trails throughout the episode. And I mean, obviously it's been ever present throughout the show, but we didn't realize it. But it ties in so beautifully into, well, sad and tragically into the end of the episode, which I saw that coming because of the nature of how things were playing out in the end, but we'll get to that conversation when we get to it. We also catch up with Yao Mei having a conversation with Gwen about her remembering everything. And it's like, yes, the truth is this Kowloon is fake. But she doesn't want to use the word illusions because Kowloon might be illusion, but she doesn't want to call her friend Reiko a fake, you know? And, you know, Gwen is telling her to leave Kowloon because it's like you, me, Miyuki, and Kudo, we're all real people. We shouldn't be here because it's like I get you want and you sacrificing for someone that's important to you, like you're trying to sacrifice for Reiko. That's beautiful. That's amazing. But is that going to further you along the path of the life that you want? Like you have to find out. You have to realize what you should do and what you want to do. And it's like don't you want to be your absolute self? And can staying here in this Kowloon help you do that? I mean, that's the thing. And she even comments on it like, if it wasn't for Reiko, she wouldn't have found herself like she was. Because, you know, it's like, I made my determination. I want to be the absolute self. So like meeting this Kujirai was kind of a very necessary step in this journey for Yame to grow and change and become the version of herself that she wants to be and embrace that side of things. So also pointing out, you know, the whole it's always summer here, which Gwen's kind of like, huh, it is kind of interesting how it is this never ending summer that never really breaks and stuff. So Yao Mei is trying to determine like what she's going to do at the end of the day because once again she doesn't want to abandon Reiko because Reiko is a very dear and important friend to hers, but it's also like what Gwen said did kind of get inside of her head, and so she's thinking about like stuff her mom says. She was specifically thinking about the earrings, and she goes back to her house and stares at those earrings. At the same time, oh yeah, I forgot something important she learned from Gwen was that the reason why no it wasn't even Gwen, it was Yulong who told her this that the reason why Kowloon was demolished 3 years ago is because it was Hebi Numa, the Hebi Numa group covering something up. And you would assume like, well, the thread that tends to be at the centerfold of all of these like connected threads is Kujirai B, because we know she died from some medication. Whatever that medication is has been completely like wiped. There's no records of it. So, and we even see with Kujirai when she's wearing Kujirai B's glasses, she saw like, hey, she took those charms and she slid one into like a little mail slot, and she got some pills in exchange. So it's like, okay, so that's probably the medicine. Like, I don't know if someone was kind of doing some shady stuff, like selling off some medicine that Heavy Numa shouldn't have been putting out there. Like, maybe they cut corners, because that's a typical big corporation thing to do, is to save money. Even though you're like saving pennies at a time by cutting some corners, those pennies can add up to millions upon millions in the long run in the grand scheme of things. So, you know, it's about cutting corners and making as much profit as you can. So who knows if it's something of kind of that nature and ilk. This is what's been behind Heavy Numa making the move to like demolish Kowloon to cover up their crime, which is interesting considering like, well, I guess there still would have been remnants of it in the original Kowloon, because I was about to say like Kujirai dying, you already like wiped the records of it, but still you probably had to nip it all in the bud, get rid of any traces so there would be no direct correlation to the Heavy Numa group. It does make you wonder, does Miyuki know about this angle to things? Like maybe he is aware of it. I don't know. But because Kujirai saw through Kujirai B's glasses, she's made the decision like, okay, I'm going to go to that part of town again and I'm going to investigate this. Because something else kind of stayed with that discussion was like, I think it was something she also learned from Yulong, was like the charms are an important piece to hint to whatever it is that the Heavy Numa group was up to. And obviously it was part of some exchange or whatever. I wonder if like the codes that were discussed last episode are representative. Like it's interesting because only there's one code that of like the 10 or whatever that Kujirai found last episode, only one of them was like wasn't like the 403 one. I think the 202 was it 202? I'm blanking on the codes now, but it was like the 200 something one. I think she found like multiples of that, but I think it was like the 403 one she only found one of. If I remember correctly, do forgive me, that was last week and my brain is mush. So I do apologize if I'm getting that backwards. So I'm wondering if that one that was only one, I'm wondering if that's the one that you have to exchange for the pills. I wonder, is that even applicable in this Kowloon, which we'll kind of discuss that later on. But if that knowledge wasn't known, like this Kowloon wouldn't recreate that. Is kind of what I'm saying. Like I said, we'll talk about it more in depth when I get to that section of the story. But Kujirai decides to get Yao Mei's help. And Yao Mei still being like, no, I'm going to help out my friend, especially because I can't let her go off and do something dangerous on her own. So it's like, I've got her back through and through, but still probably thinking to herself, is this the right thing to do? Because once again, a lot of that Gwen stuff, conversation still resonates with her. So it's like, it's that the better thing to do. Which, speaking of Gwen, he sits down with Kudo and they have a really interesting conversation where Gwen's like, oh yeah, like, you know, the whole what do you already know about this Kowloon? And Kudo's like, oh yeah, that the real person and the fake can't coexist. He's like, wait, you already knew that? It's like, yes, because it turns out one of the old people he plays, was it Mr. Chan or Chow? I don't remember what it is, but one of the guys he plays like mahjong with, it's the real version. It's like, oh, I saw it myself when he came into town and that one disappeared. He's like, in fact, the other guy disappeared, so most likely he's like, I know the same thing happened here. I was like, interesting. But then also he's continuing to eat and drink stuff, but it turns out his memory's still intact because even Gwen's like, wait, I don't understand how you could eat all that stuff. He's like, I eat when I want to, but it's like, no, that's weird. Because Yao Mei drank a drink and she immediately forgot stuff. It's not until she ate something from the outside of this Kowloon that she remembered all of a sudden. So I was like, how have you, who's been chomping on the food here continuously, because we've seen you eat here multiple times throughout the show just thus far. So I'm like, how do you still have why isn't this place messing with your head? I was like, are you a special case or something? And boy, oh boy, in a way I wasn't expecting. I thought it was interesting and poignant too that there's a conversation happening on the TV about cloning. And Gwen has a perspective of, he thinks like, because it's a cat that was cloned and a woman's so happy about it because she's like, oh, it's doing the same thing my deceased cat would do. And he's like, oh, that's kind of a disservice to the person because it's like this thing is moving and doing exactly the same thing as the deceased. It's kind of like, that's kind of bad. It's kind of a shame for both the cat and the owner. They're kind of saying they're both victims in this sad situation. And Kudo did not comment on it. He just kept it pushing. So at the same time, what Yulong promised Shohei is still resonating in his head because he doesn't want to kill Kujirai, but like she just happens to walk up towards him, and the moment he's looking at her, he's feeling like you can see it kind of creep in because that shift in the animation of his eyes, that kind of like deranged look he had, because it's like, oh my god, all I have to do is kill you and I can get what I want, because you know he himself is drowning in regret, which we'll get to in a second. But yeah, they went to this Kowloon Shohei's place, and Yao Mei came along, and obviously it's kind of a little awkward for Shohei to see the younger version of himself, and it's just kind of like, oh, especially because this is the younger version of himself that was able to kind of embrace who they were and be happy wearing these pretty dresses and pretty clothes, because it's kind of like, I don't know, you know, you can infer a lot from yourself. You'll probably never get to know what it was, but maybe it's a thing of, he was probably told like, no, you need to start dressing more like a boy. Boys don't wear pretty, like you can nice outfits, but you can't wear anything pretty or frilly. That's for girls, you know. And it's probably like, you're a boy, embrace it and kind of grow up. Like it was kind of okay when you were a child, but like no, you kind of have to snap out of that. You know, you just don't do that, and like men don't do that. I don't know if that's kind of what, once again, you can infer and kind of think your own thing. We'll probably never get a direct answer for that. I don't know if the manga covers that a little bit more in depth than the anime is going to, but I thought it was interesting too because partway through the conversation, because he's looking at all the dresses, and then Yame was like, "Oh my God, Shohei! This Shohei's also really into like pretty things too." And the young Shohei's like, "Oh my God, for real?" And the older Shohei starts crying, and I thought in that moment, I think she started piecing it together a little bit, where like Shohei was like, "Oh yeah, it's just like staring at the past," and you could tell like Yame, well, that phrasing I'm sure hit her like a ton of bricks just because the past and stuff like that, something she's kind of been running from. But I thought in that moment she figured it out that both of these Shoheis were the same people. Now at the exact same time this is all happening, we cut to Kudo and Gwen. And then, Kudo's finding out like, oh yeah, like you never knew, but Shohei was a boy the entire time, but you never really noticed. So he said it's we, so I'm assuming he means like me and Reiko and pretty much everyone around you just felt like, well, there's no reason to kind of change that. It doesn't really change anything. So, which I thought was so fascinating. Which also gives me some clarity. I should have just gone with the principle of Occam's razor. The simplest answer is the simplest. The simplest like result is most likely the answer type of situation, because I kept going back and forth. I'm like, maybe it's a lot more complicated. I thought, because the thing that kept throwing me off is, well, then why is it that both Shoheis are here even though no one else, not the real and the like generic, cannot be in the same coexistence? So I'm like, why is they still here then? That's why I was thinking like, is it because you technically changed your gender, like because you had a sex change or something? Which I was wondering like, would that be applicable in this case? Kind of would be, but we'll get to that in a second. So I'm like, how does that operate? And then Gwen, because he had just talked about like the little thing he made for cats, and then he just happens to look in the alleyway. It was not there before, and then he sees like, wait, that's there. And then immediately the young Shohei, the generic Shohei disappears. I was like, oh my God, it's Kudo. It's based around what he knows, and it makes so many pieces start falling into place, because you're like, the message that that Kujirai saw being like, stop looking or whatever. Part of me wonders, I'm like, because that made me ask the question like, does Kudo know about the pills and the thing that ended up ultimately killing Reiko? Because my mind immediately started flooding with so much stuff, and it's like basically everything in this Kowloon, for whatever reason, is based around what he knows. And the moment he found out, hey, Shohei's actually a guy, so now that the real Shohei is here, it ends up like replacing it, and the generic ends up disappearing. It's purely based around his knowledge. The moment Gwen told him about the thing that was in the back alley, all of a sudden it pops up now. Why certain pathways in Kowloon, some were recreated, others that would lead places don't go anywhere. They're kind of blocked off. It's because those are places that Kudo doesn't have knowledge of. Either when he was originally in Kowloon, he never went to those places. Maybe those are places that Kujirai went on her own, or just maybe those are just places in the city he never explored those areas. So it's like, it's like, right, it's a giant, you're kind of in his, a living manifestation of his memory. It's like, how can he go to a place he's never been before? Like, and that's how it meant. I was like, that's such a good twist. Like, because it also makes sense, like, why the hell he's the only one not affected, even though he's like a real person, why the food in this place isn't having an effect on him like it did Yao Mei. And Shohei figures this all out, because I guess he went into this with some knowledge, but like there were guesses with no concrete evidence, and this situation with the generic Shohei disappearing was kind of like the final, like, okay, this was kind of like the final example I needed to prove like this thesis correct. Like I said, I just think they probably are, like Hebi Numa included, maybe even Miyuki already have some idea, because Gwen definitely didn't, but maybe Miyuki, I don't know if Yulong has kind of pieced this up together, but like, maybe the only reason why Shohei knows is because Miyuki's dad figured it out, and that's what they had knowledge of. But like I said, maybe it was just a pure thesis, but now this was the X factor that kind of gave Shohei the answer. So he ends up, answering, them being like, hey, you didn't recognize me, did you? But I'm Shohei. And then kind of putting it out there that this is all based on Kudo's memories. And it's like, what were the two things you were here for? It's like, one was to investigate this Kowloon, and second thing was to kill Reiko. It's interesting because like his conversation, like killing her, not unless those events were done out of order, like him visiting and getting that from no, because I'm like he was already in. Yeah, I think I was because he hasn't left Kowloon since showing up here, has he? I don't think he has. Because I think in my head I was treating it like he's left and come to Kowloon. So like the Yulong conversation happened before he arrived in Kowloon. But I think in my head I was treating it like he came to Kowloon, left, had that conversation with Yulong, and then came back. But it was like even before he came back to Kowloon, they already had that conversation. That conversation was further in the past than I thought it was. At least that's my thinking of it. Because for him to say like, yo, that was the second reason I came here, even though, because like I said, in my head, I thought he already came here. Because I was like, because once again, I'm confusing myself because I'm also like, because that was in Hong Kong, that wasn't in Kowloon. Because it's like, well, for one, Yulong can't be in Kowloon. So, but like I said, it didn't correlate in my head that event, that conversation was even further in the past. But now that he spent more time with, that's just for the audience's sake to understand part of his extra layer to his motivation for coming here. And he was just drowning in that regret even more so because he got to know Kujirai and kind of didn't want to hurt her. And the way that Yulong set it up, it's like, okay, you want to go back to who you were back then. All right, so upload all your memories into the generic Terra from up to this point in time. So that will include those 3 years like post Kowloon being destroyed up until now. And he said, instead of making a new copy, we're just going to use the pre-existing version of you. And so the way I was interpreting that, and maybe I'm wrong about it, is because that generic version of Shohei already existed, we're just going to implant your current memories into that version of yourself. That way you can go back to who you were back then, looking like who you were then, and embrace that side of yourself that you feel like you lost all those years ago. And now you just get to keep like yourself, your consciousness. It's like the you of now gets to basically time travel back to who you were without actually having to actual time travel, and you'll keep all your memories intact. And so you'll be able to be you experiencing that version. But it's like, what does that mean for the you on the outside? That's a larger existential question, I'm sure. But for Shohei, it's kind of like, I don't want to do that anymore. Like, I think running into his younger version of himself and kind of meeting Yao Ming, meeting Kujirai, this Kujirai all kind of changed things for him, put things in a different perspective. So he plans on leaving, and he was going to leave the jacket behind because it was his way of just kind of like, I'm letting go of everything. But Yao Mei grabs the jacket and grabs the dresses and is like, here, take these with you. Doesn't mean you have to give up on the things that you love. And so Yao Mei, is kind of inspired by this too in the conversation with Gwen. And she's like, I'm going to go meet with my mom. Because she realizes like all I've been doing is running away from myself. You inspired me to be the absolute self, to make to make this lie the reality. And it's like, you're such a strong person in making that decision for yourself, and I don't want to lose to you, so I've got to face the past instead of running from it, because that's all I'm doing. I'm going to face my mom, and that's all I've been doing is running until now. That moment she said all that was the moment I was like, as she said she was going to come back, I was like, she's not, because she's not going to be able to see Kowloon anymore, because this place is driven by regret, and you're willing to face your regrets head on, because the whole point was I want to face this reality so that I have no regrets. And without regrets, you can't, like, this Kowloon kind of served its purposes, and now you're no longer bogged down by regret. You can't see this place anymore. So the moment Yao Mei said that, I figured that's where the storyline was going to end. So, and they ended up leaving together. It's like, all right, I'm going to be back in like 2 business days or whatever. And also she has like the 2 earrings, one that represents the Yao Mei she is now, and the other one that's like the earring that was given to her by her mom that wanted her to be more like her. It's like, it's like, okay, when I come back, once I've had a conversation with my mom, I will replace both earrings, because now it's like, right, it's who she was in the past, who she is right now, and when she comes back with the new earrings, it will be to embrace I'll replace both because I will neither be like that Yao Mei or this Yao Mei. I will be the absolute me. And as they're walking, the dresses obviously start disappearing, and it's like, damn. But for Shohei, it's like, it's okay. He's like, I've only kind of looked at life as just kind of focusing on the losses of life in life, but you kind of opened my eyes that there is so much more, that it's like, just because, like, I don't have to just, like, it doesn't have to just be lost. It's like who I am and that child version of myself and who I wanted to be, I can carry them with me. They don't have to completely disappear. It's like, Shohei's becoming like the true him in that moment too. But what's a powerful moment is when he opens up the jacket, the designs that happened on the inside that Yao Mei made for him, those modifications are still there, even though they were made in Kowloon, which are like, oh, what does that mean? But then the moment they turn around and look, both of them see the rubbled city of Kowloon. So now they're both face their regrets. They can't see it for what it is. And I was like, that's going to be the tragic thing, that Yao Mei, like, she can't see Reiko anymore, which is ironic considering this same episode is when Yulong was able to get in, interestingly enough, while these two have lost the ability to. Now, the fact is he's here, there's a good chance, well, Shohei isn't going to do it, but maybe Yulong himself will be the one that try and kill Reiko, you know? So, because the whole conversation was about, you know, sooner or later the test was going to have to be done to see what happens to a generic when they leave, because we see what happens to things from Kowloon that disappear, but what does that mean for a generic? You know, can they exist outside of this Kowloon? Very, very interesting developments, very tragic and sad ending, and I don't think it's ever crossed Reiko's mind in this moment, like, hey, that, like, I don't like, even though it's like the storm is kind of hitting at the same time, blurring her vision because she can't see them leaving, but it's symbolic of like, oh, them not being able to see that Kowloon anymore. So we'll see where things kind of go from there. What does Kujirai do? Also, what does Gwyn do now that they've both kind of found out, like, yo, this stems from Kudo? He's kind of like the piece to all this. We still don't know, because even Shohei was like, we don't know how or why it happens, but we know he's still at the epicenter of all of this. So they kind of have that knowledge now that this Kowloon is birthed because of him. So the question is, like, how do they handle that knowledge going forward? We'll ultimately have to wait to see where all this takes us going forward into the next episode, which should be the penultimate episode of the season. So I'm excited to see what happens. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.